Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this conversation with my guest, Rosemary Ganley. Now, Rosemary, born in Kirkland Lake, St. Michael's in Toronto for your degree, and Montreal for 10 years. And then, above all things, you end up back in Peterborough. Glory be to God. And, as they say, that's pretty much give you a grounding of where you are today. And one of the reasons we're talking together today, one of the reasons is the word that's really kind of, I've struggled with getting an understanding of it, is the word feminism. And then not only is that a difficult one, then somebody like you says, well, I'm a Catholic feminist. How? I can't put the two together. I'll give you a chance to, first of all, what the hell is that?
That's mine. That's my phone.
Oh,
I'm
that's
sorry.
your phone.
Yeah.
That's okay. So, first of all, if you could start with the notion of and your idea of a feminist and a connection to not just women but to men.
Yes. Yes, I know that. I know the attitude. I've been in feminist circles. Well, I read my way into feminism. It wasn't from personal trauma, because I had an empowering father, brothers, husband, sons. But it was social analysis that led me from the 1960s right on into a conviction that women globally are second class, and sometimes they suffer greatly from that. In the West, there's perhaps less suffering because women have been making strides in education and employment. But the world would be very much healthier and better for men and women should this critique take hold of the way things are, and genuine equality be advanced. So that was my feminism. And feminism is, it's a troublesome word for some, but I appropriate it because it's just a shorthand to an analysis that things are not as they should be. And so let's work to make gender equality truly real. So that, and feminism is simply the conviction that things are not equal between the genders, and to work towards social structures, attitudes that would render that, that would change it. And then there's the Catholic piece, and it made perfect sense for me from my social justice grasp of Catholicism that this was a worthy cause to work on. It's not the only one. Poverty and the environment, I would think, maybe, although we shouldn't prioritize what's the most grievous issue we have, that feminism was up there among the top causes to work on globally.
Yeah, because even here in say, North America, it was still very much a male-dominated society and culture, even though women were starting to get their voice and speak up. But like when a man says he's a feminist, what's he saying?
Oh, they're my dearest friends. They are just convinced by the same social analysis I am that the world would be better were true gender equality to take place, and so they will ally themselves with those causes. Sometimes they're marginalized by other, more patriarchal men. Oh, what are you doing at that, or listening to that, or reading that book? I remember one son went to Trent, took women's studies, and some girl students said to him in the class, "What are you doing here?" So he was kind of being dismissed. As he said, "I'm genuinely interested in these questions, and in a fairer world, a juster world." So I have a good friend in Toronto named Michael Coughlin, who his new book is all about being an ally. What is it? And of course, we in the dominant culture need to be allies with indigenous causes now too. So you really learn from the people who have suffered the most. How can I be an ally? Just be by silent? turning up to your meetings, writing a letter, signing a petition, demonstrating. How can I be an ally? And there's lots and lots of men, some more active, some more passive, who are allies with the feminist movement.
When you say that, like, and again, my bias will show, does that mean for the men that they're becoming more aware of their emotional side, more aware of their feelings and to express them, so that there is a bridge between men and women? Because I don't want to stereotype, but women seem to be more in touch with their emotional side of their life, eh?
Yes, I was just thinking this morning. I was looking at a piece by that New York Congresswoman. They call her AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she is bringing genuine feeling to the questioning she's putting these politicians to her own life as a politician, and she's highlighting. It's just a comfort level, I think. I don't think men have any fewer deep emotions of concern, care, sorrow, sympathy, but women certainly have confidence to express them. So apparently Joe Biden teared up not long ago, and maybe 25 years ago that would have been despised. But now he's seen as a genuine, complete human being with his feelings. So do I think women, I don't think they're superior emotionally at all.
No.
But I think the ease with which they portray it. Yes.
Yeah, so more in the comfort zone for expressing, and bringing that to bear on the issues of the day.
Yes.
And I think when you're saying men, it means we can be an ally with you.
Yes.
Because we can bring our feminine side to that same issues.
Yes. And women to bring their so-called masculine virtues, which is assertiveness, clear thinking,
right,
looking at outcomes. I value those qualities, and I would like to expand both my wings.
Yes,
the feeling and the thinking.
And the thinking, yeah. But the thing which strikes me, Rosemary, and we kind of got away from it there a bit, come back to it, is the notion of a Catholic feminist. Because we live in a church that's pretty well dominated by males. The culture of the church is certainly an expression of that maleness and power, misuse of power, if you will, and domination, of course. But aside from that, like, how do you, or have you been able to reconcile your place in the Catholic community, the wider one, not just Peter, is the church, and a feminist? Like, I think you're walking on thin ice.
Actually, there's more and more people that nod in agreement. The more articulate you become about the possibility that this is actually a very good combination. A desire to change the world towards gender equality, and the Jesus that I know from the New Testament.
Right.
The lifting up of Mary Magdalene, the encounters, the debates he had with women, the assigning, the inclusion of women in everything. Yeah. Christian feminists don't have any objections to Jesus at all. In fact, they're finding their source. If they're looking for a religious source, they find a strong one in Jesus. So starting from that point, then it leads you to an analysis of how wrong-headed the development of the Roman Catholic Church in its structural form has been. And I thought yesterday, how heartbreaking. Maybe if women had been in on the governance with the disciples, and through the history of the church, if women had had an equal place in the development of theology, in the training of the next generation, how much suffering might have been reduced. Not to be sentimental, but maybe there would have been fewer wars, and certainly the sex abuse of children would have been called out way before.
Right, that's true.
I don't think there's a moral superiority with women, but I think the concerns towards children and family, having been mothers and so on, given birth, would be heightened. And I often think about the good that has been left undone, or the suffering that has been caused. And so the patriarchal structure, which lots of good men, leaders, have tried to change, and they've run into, the Trump syndrome within the church, ambition and lack of awareness and stubbornness and cruelty. Lots of good reforming men have run into that and perhaps have lost heart or been defeated.
When you talk about that part of it, I think of my mother giving birth to 11 children.
Yes.
And because birth control was certainly a mortal sin, and therefore if you practice birth control, you're on a one-way train to hell.
Yes.
And so I think of my mother and the women who gave birth to so many, and yet we see today when women have taken charge of their body, it's maybe 2 or 3 children.
Yes.
And how does...
Yes. Yes, that was certainly an early teaching. It was my husband and I together, that discerned. That teaching is wrong and harmful. And I lived for 3 years in Jamaica and 3 years in Tanzania, and I tried to make links with the permanently poor in those cultures. And when they would say to me, I have a newborn baby and I'd like to practice birth control, but I have to ask the priest, I would just about hit the roof. And I would say to myself, I'm going to spend my life working so a situation comes where a woman is infused by the Holy Spirit, and she can make those decisions, and with her spouse. It's not a solo decision, but it has to do with fruitfulness and fidelity, and the good of the family as a whole. But to rob the believer of this center of a moral discernment and say it belongs to the village priest or the bishop or the pope, it seems to me a great abuse, and I want to work against it.
Yeah. When you put it that way, you can see how, again, it's the imposing of power according to a mental vision of how they think it should be, and imposing that on men and women, married people.
Yes.
And how today, I think the signs I see and have for the last 25 or 30 years is that people are becoming much more mature.
Yes.
And as a result of their maturity, they're thinking for themselves, and they're saying, we'll decide.
Yes.
We will make that decision.
Yes.
And that seems to be that married men and women have
Yes.
matured and taken responsibility for their life.
Yes. All to the good. And then making other moral decisions about the direction of this family, our generosity, our service. When you practice using your own discernment, it gets easier the next time too.
Yes.
And then I think your joy in your own independence increases. I don't mean independence in a selfish way, but just your sense of worth. Father Leo, you speak all the time about self-love, about regarding yourself as a child, as a person blessed by God, and this fits in with that. The more that a spiritual leader can empower the believers to exercise their own freedom.
Yeah.
I think Jesus came for freedom for the individual soul.
Well, I think so. And the scripture said, Jesus said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Yes.
So it's your own truth in your center, and then when you live your own truth, then it's claiming your freedom.
Yes. And then I think everybody, too, is a theologian. For example, when I looked at why the church was so abrasive about this no birth control, it came back to a fundamentalist theology that every marital act needs to be open to new life. maybe that was meant in good faith, but
Yeah.
it was so wrong and so damaging. So if you know some theology and read, there's so much available to read, you can make your way to deciding that's a church teaching, but it's harmful, let's say, to gays and lesbians
Yeah.
or to married people, and so I'm going to set it aside.
Yeah.
And wherever I can speak and persuade people, including clerics, that we should set that aside, that's maybe spoke for its times, 1870 or something,
Right.
the more I think we're living a vocation.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, vocation does indicate a sense of self,
Yes.
sense of self-reliance and self-empowerment to make those decisions because you know you're in charge of your own life, nobody else.
Yes, ultimately, I think that's true authenticity. Young talked about finding the true self. It's not for the purposes, like shallow thinkers will say, that'll just make you more self-centered and selfish. No, it's the healthy sense of self.
And the truth is, it'll make you less selfish
I believe so.
because you don't have to grab onto artificial things to boost your ego. You
Yes.
don't have to.
Yes.
And that's really does set you free, I think. And Rosemary, and this being a Catholic feminist, how has that been for you? Have there been struggles and dark days and criticism from people that you would prefer to have supported you?
Not in my inner circle.
No.
I think there's a little bit of bemusement, perhaps, among some of my relatives, that I give so much time and attention to these matters, but no active opposition. It's usually just the stranger, the man in the backwards ball hat that'll stop you on the street. You don't even know the person. This is a small town, and not long ago he said, "You're not a Catholic. All Catholics believe in pro-life, and you shouldn't be allowed to go into the Catholic schools." It's just a gratuitous insult.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm not going to respond.
No.
Because the problem with social media is it can be anonymous.
Yes.
And so I think for your own soul's sake, you should ignore unsigned social media attacks. But I'm a Canadian, and I don't get rocks thrown through my window or anything like that. I think I get marginalized. I mean, I haven't met church authority, Catholic church in my diocese. I would like to meet with them, but in a coffee shop, please.
Yeah.
I don't do chanceries.
Yeah.
So I would like to be considered a leader who takes her roots from her Catholicism.
Right.
That's what I would like to be known as.
Yeah, so deeply rooted in it yourself.
Yes.
And I guess for some people who have a different idea of Catholicism, it can seem like an irritant to them.
Well, yeah, but I can't defend the indefensible.
No.
The evidence pours onto us
Yeah.
about particularly these days, about the right wing attacking Pope Francis, who's
Right.
obviously a good man, and the investigations of more and more abuse by clergy. So it's hard to self-identify, but I'm eager to do that because I was nourished by marriage encounter, by pre-marriage preparation, by theology courses during my whole life, by friendships among working with priests and sisters in Jamaica and in Tanzania. I've had so much nourishment from the best of our tradition.
Yeah.
And I can't undo my identity,
No.
nor do I want to.
No.
And I think there's two aspects of Catholicism that keep me grounded. One is the sacramentality. I think the sacraments are, as they celebrate moments in life, happy and sad moments, are deeply nourishing. And they strike me as true. So it's the sacramental life. People sometimes say to me, "Oh, you're really a Unitarian, you know." No, I'm really not. I'm really a Eucharistic Christian.
Right.
That's one thing. And then the sense of community too.
Right.
It really is a large tent. I've lived many places, and when it's well expressed, it really is a wonderful home.
Right. And yeah, and it is a home. At least that's the way I feel about it anyway. And it's not that I don't have a few questions about it, but it's still my spiritual home.
Yes.
And I'm okay with it. And now you're writing in the Examiner every week. Do you have a philosophy of what's behind your chosen topics? Because I notice they're very variable.
Yes.
Different groups of people, different people get mentioned in there. What's your goal with that, or what are you trying to show?
I'd like to affirm life. And to celebrate people. Usually they're not too well known, who are doing good things. So I have 4 topics in my head right now. I'll just share them with you to show you the variety. My editor never knows what I'm going to come down with, but he hardly tampers with a word. I'm going to write about the development of the Mount soon.
Yes.
The Mount Community Center.
Yeah.
As a symbol of cooperation and emanating from faith into service of the most marginal. So I'm going to write about the Mount. I'm also writing about the election, the federal election to some extent.
Oh, yes.
There's a group I interviewed. They want to strengthen the CBC, and I am a CBC radio listener, particularly. Right. I'm so nourished and so taught by CBC programs. So they're going to have a campaign called We Choose Canada.
Oh, yes.
And that's an interesting story, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little group of volunteers.
Oh, yes.
And then after that, there's a young woman, a nurse educator, who lives overseas, and she's from Peterborough. Her name is Karen Hobday. I want to write about her because she says, when I was a teenager, she says, I got my start with Jamaican self-help.
Right.
I was 16 years old. I went overseas. I saw that I could do something helpful. Now she's gone on to, she's nearly studying for her PhD now in health and gender. I don't know what country she's quite in, but she's coming back to Peterborough.
Yeah. Get her baby baptized.
Yes, yes. So that's a good news story. I'd like to, I know it's a very anxious age. I would call it an age of apprehension here now. And I would just like the reader who reads my 600 words to say, Mom, I didn't know that was going on. That's good.
Yeah.
I feel better this morning.
Yeah. Yeah, because good news is scarce.
Yeah.
Good news is really scarce, whether it's social media or the newspaper.
Yeah. Yes.
It's scarce. And there's every reason why people are apprehensive, you know, and somehow I hear from what you're saying is to keep hope alive, that people can live with hope.
It's because I genuinely feel it when I read these stories and write about them. It's not that it's not put on. I mean, I don't wake up in the morning and say, now something I do today has got to generate hope in somebody. But I genuinely want to express what I am feeling and the admiration I'm feeling and the confirmation I'm feeling. So that's what comes out.
So are you going to continue with writing in the Examiner for the next indefinite future?
Yes, not looking too far down the line.
Right.
But at age 82, it keeps your mind alive and spirit and keeps you meeting new people.
Yeah.
So for all those reasons, and because I would like the Examiner to survive, there are communities without a daily newspaper.
That's right.
They're very impoverished by that.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't know about you, but I get the Examiner every day. And I'm quite content with reading it. And, it satisfies me.
Yes.
Yeah, that really does.
It is. It's a community building tool.
Right, right.
What's going on at
What's
City Hall?
going on.
What's going on at the health unit?
To keep the people informed, and people can have a sense of knowing their community.
Yes. Yes. I'm just organizing this morning a year-end neighborhood barbecue for the
Oh, yeah.
whole street, both
Oh, yeah.
sides.
Uh-huh.
It's restoring the sense of connection,
Yeah,
because it's a confusing world to face alone,
yeah, yeah,
and that's where meditation strengthens you too.
yeah.
To look out at the world from eyes of faith.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the, I guess that's my main prayer is meditation, you know, and I guess I look upon it as one of the main sources for keeping me plugging away at 87.
Yeah. With a little giggle, sense of humor.
Yeah,
Yeah, we Irish were blessed with that.
Yeah.
It's a great blessing.
yeah, that's right. Along with the melancholy, there's the humor, right? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, Rosemary, I think we covered our topic very nicely this morning.
Good.
It's nice to meet you in the sense of explaining for me like, what it means to be a feminist and a Catholic feminist. And having done that, you've led me into areas of your involvement as you manifest that in your life, the way you've manifested. And certainly Jamaica self-help has been one of the great markers of your journey, you and John, and the influence you had. You taught. You were head of the religion department at St. Peter's, and you often talked to me about the visits you had from the principal, and
Well,
then
I haven't been able to toe the party line
no,
because you're given a brain, a critical brain,
yeah.
and so you use it.
Yeah, but you know it's kind of interesting, Rosemary, that one of the graduate expectations is that the students graduate from the Catholic high school as critical thinkers.
Yes.
And I always laugh because they're dangerous.
Yes.
They're dangerous to the institution, critical thinkers. They just don't swallow everything hook, line, and sinker. They think for themselves.
Yes.
And to me, that's just being truly human, to think for yourself.
I agree with you.
You know, it's nothing. So anyway, I thank you for coming by this morning.
It's a pleasure
And,
with your new technology here.
Yeah, right. And I'll put that up and I'll let the people know that you're there and see where it goes.
Good.
So thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Leo.
Don't go away till I turn it off.